Good morning and welcome to the Ask Weldon Show, episode 223. My name is Weldon, and this is my show where you ask me questions, usually about sports psychology. I'm a sports psychology trainer. I have a Master's of Science. Is that right? Master's of Sports Science degree in sport and exercise psychology, and I answer your questions based on my background in training professional esport teams and my knowledge from study and from work. You can call in your question for the show, which I recommend that you do by using the Anchor app, anchor.fm/Weldon Green. Please, 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 please call in your questions. I need more questions. You guys are letting me down. You're not really letting me down. Okay, I love y'all. But here's the reason that you should call in your question. Number one barrier that inhibits people from calling in their question is that they already know what I'm going to say. They're like, Weldon, I've watched a lot of your content. Like, look at your views on YouTube. The same 500 people are watching all your videos every time. So I've seen every single one. And I know what you're going to say. So why would I call in my question? I know what the answer is. I just need to do it. That's the problem. Okay, well, call it in anyway, because there's a whole bunch of other people who are watching who actually need to hear me answer your question, right? And so you can take one for the team and you can listen to me lecture you, even though you're like, I know, Weldon, I know, shut up. I just need to act on it. That's the real problem. And then it will help them, right? Or you can call it in and be like, okay, well, I know that this is the right thing to do, but what about motivation? Like, how can I find motivation? You can give me your context, right? Or you can say like, well, I know that I need to be motivated and I just don't care about it enough. Okay. Maybe I can help you with that too. So call in your question, even if you know what I'm going to say. And also, here's the second barrier that prevents people from calling it in. They don't think it's a good question. And if that's the case, don't worry. I'll just skip it, okay? You don't have to freak out. Just call in your question and let me be the judge of that. And I know what good questions are and what good questions aren't, so I'll be able to tell pretty easily. So yeah, Anchor, get the Anchor app. They don't have a web app yet for you to call in questions. You still have to use your phone. Generally speaking, phone microphones are a lot higher quality anyway than the ones you're going to use on your computer, so that's a good thing. So go to my profile on Anchor, Weldon Green, and then just click the little message button and you can put an audio message up to a minute. Rehearse it a little bit. It makes your voice sound really cool. As you'll see in today's questions, you just sound super spiffy when you use this app. Okay. That's it for announcements. Let's jump into the show. Make sure, one more announcement. Of course, I stream this live on Twitch, twitch.tv/MyGamesWeldon. And you can catch the before and after show. We just had a 45-minute conversation about physical activity level, working out, diet, caloric deficit and surplus, how it is that you burn blood glucose, how to adjust your body mass index down so that you can lose skinny fat, all sorts of really cool topics, people delving into deeper and deeper questions, providing more information. That's the kind of stuff that's possible. So if you want to join the pre-show audience before this show, it's kind of like a talk show. You just show up, just like you would in New York outside of Stephen Colbert's Daily Show or whatever, and you get a ticket. You come in, sit down. I come out before the show. We chat, exchange ideas. Maybe I shoot some T-shirts in the audience with the T-shirt gun. And then we kick off the broadcast. So please join us. You'll have a lot of fun. All right, the first question for today is from Austin, and he asks a question that we've heard a lot of times, but he puts it in a little bit of a different way. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Weldon.
Hi, Austin.
My name is Austin, and I was calling in to ask if you feel that humans have an inherent skill cap. Like, can somebody who trains a lot for years even reach the point where they're at the same skill level as somebody who is just naturally gifted at that? And does this change based on whether it's a video game like League of Legends versus a very physical sport like football? Thank you. Bye.
All right. So, we've tackled this question a lot, and let me go over the basics again so that I can put this in context. The question is there genetic potential that limits your level of ability in sport? So this is a very complex question because modern sport is not tied in with our genes, right? We didn't evolve to do modern sport. We just invented a bunch of sports in the last 100 years, and now we do them with these bodies that were evolved for completely different purposes. So everything in the world that we could ever do has both a nurture and a nature component, a genetic component, and a component that is changed by our environment, okay? And that's including how we're raised, okay? And how our brains are wired as we're growing up. So this gets really complex because let's say that it's not hard-coded in your genes, but it is hard-coded in your brain from ages 0 through 18. So do we call that genetics or not? The answer is no, of course, it's nurture, but to the average person, it looks like a talent, right? To the average 25-year-old looking at another 25-year-old, looks like the person has a talent, even though they were just raised differently, right? And if they were both raised in different environments, it would be a completely different situation when they hit age 25 together. So everything has this nurture-nature component. The question is always how much percentage. Like, for example, height. We think it's 40% genetic unless you live in an area where everybody gets to eat as much food as they want, and then it becomes 80% genetic. So, genes predict 40% of your height globally, and then your diet and your environment predicts the other 60%, unless you live in a first world country in a decent socioeconomic status where you get as much food and as much calcium as you could possibly want, and then everybody who's around, their genetics predict 80% of their height. And then the other 20% is environmental factors. So you see that it's also complicated by the level of exposure that people get to, high quality caloric rich foods, to incredibly nurturing environments, maybe to sport and sport-like activities when they're growing up. And to understand how to answer this question in the context of sport, you have to understand what the biggest factors are in terms of genetic versus non-genetic determinism. So what are the things where genetics determine the most compared to environment? And generally speaking, it's things like height and VO2 max. So your maximum amount of effort that your muscles can put out in terms of your oxygen intake. And your pain tolerance, so your tolerance for acidosis and pain and fatigue in the muscle. So some people, their subconscious regulator of their effort allows them to go further and fatigue and push through fatigue more because it's like a regulation effect in the brain. A lot of these people, we say they're broken because usually they get heat stroke. If you have somebody whose brain is a little bit broken or busted, they can run until their body overheats and then they get heat stroke. So people who get heat stroke generally get heat stroke again or are at risk of getting heat stroke again, and it's because they can put in more effort than other people, and their brain doesn't shut the body down. It doesn't make it tired and make you pass out and make you pant and fall over at the edge of the road. Instead, they just are able to keep running, and then they just overheat and start melting tissues in their body from sheer thermal destruction. So yeah, so there's all of these conflicting issues. Probably some of the best sports to look at genetic potential in are running sports because we did evolve to run, and there's a clear-cut separation between people who have genetics for running and genetics for people who don't have genetics for running. Of course, that's complicated by the fact that we have a whole host of long-distance runners who are raised at high altitudes, like in Kenya in the Rift Valley, and who are more naturally suited from their environment to maximize their running potential, more so than their genetics being expressed, right? And then other than that, it gets really, 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 really murky because we didn't evolve to play video games. We didn't evolve to have the skill of kicking a soccer ball. You look at people like Messi, right? Compared to Ronaldo, there's clear height differences. There's clear muscular tone differences. There's clear differences in aerobic capacity. It all comes down to skill, right? And skill, when we're talking about skill in terms of coordination of the muscles and coordination of eye contact with a ball, that is almost completely environmentally based, right? But we're talking about you being raised in a certain way. So what are the genetic components of motivation? What are the genetic components of you, and your ambition? What are the genetic components of you, like being a little bit maybe autistic and like focusing on one little thing all the time in a very perfectionistic way? What is the genetic component of your parents promoting the correct kind of perfectionism instead of unhealthy perfectionism, and you, and having high expectations of you? What are the genetic components of all of those situations? So like, there's really no way of answering what you are asking in a clear-cut way, but the reality is, because of the complex interplay of all of those things, it really just kind of all comes down to your effort at the end. Like, that is the only thing that we have control over that we believe actually differentiates skill level at the top, at the pro level. I don't want to say at the very top. I think that once you get to the pro level, it's I believe, and this is from observation on my part and from reading lots of research, I believe that who gets professional in a sport or elite is determined largely by motivation, and then who gets super elite, so who sets the world records, is determined by outliers who then have gotten to that point, right? But you have to remember there's a bajillion outliers who didn't get to that point. So the genetic potentials that you have are not predictors of whether or not you'll be successful in a sport. They are predictors of whether or not you will break world records. But there are plenty of people with the same genetic predictors as the people who are breaking world records who never even got to pro. So that is moderated much more by motivation than by genetic predictors. And some of the best research on this was done in the USSR, actually. And I say USSR because it wasn't Russia at the time, right? This was during the Cold War. And they were trying to figure out how to raise really good athletes because they wanted to take over the Olympics and prove that communism was the best. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or neither, well, fortunately for my case, what they found was that better than any genetic predictors they could measure, physical speed, reaction speed, blah, 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 in youth, it was motivation that predicted who would become successful in a sport. It was the mindset of readiness that determined who was going to get to the Olympic level, more so than the actual body. So that's basically the answer. If you want to be successful at something, it's about motivation. If you want to break a world record, it's about getting to that level, which means motivation, and then being an outlier. But keep in mind that if you're an outlier, you're pretty much screwed, right? Because let's say you're like talented at soccer, so you never really have to try all that much when you're in high school. You're never probably going to become pro, sadly. Most of the you look at a lot of the success cases who are really awesome, and it's people who had to put in effort to get what they want because they weren't quote unquote naturally suited at it. Like Jordan, for example, didn't even make the starting lineup of his university team. What are some other fun examples of that? I was just thinking of 2 or 3, and they totally went on. Oh, right, chess. So IQ is a predictor of chess skill up to a certain point, and then it becomes a negative correlate. So the higher IQ, the worse chance you have of making it there. And at the grandmaster level, the average IQ is lower than the levels below it, because when you have it too easy, you don't learn to work hard and learn, and you don't learn to focus, and you don't learn to teach yourself how to refine your skills, and so you don't have the emotional and the motivational infrastructure necessary to achieve elite status. So the way that I like to recommend people look at genetics in their own life and skill in their own life is as a cutoff. You can really see already if you have a suitable level of IQ or height or speed or muscle tone at a certain age to achieve something that you want. You can be like, I can see myself with a little bit of effort swinging with the big dogs. Like I have an average IQ. I have an average. Like if you've reached the cutoff, then after that, it's your motivational level that is going to determine whether or not you can get to the successful level or not. And tons of luck and serendipity, obviously. There's basically the rest of it is just all the world giving you chances or not giving you chances. But you got to be there when the dice rolls and lands on your number, or else it's not going to happen, right? So that's the answer, Austin. There is no inherent skill cap. There is simply a bunch of various genetic factors that we have no idea how they mix together. And then most of it is then how your brain is formed. So your brain is forming from age -3 months or -6 months, maybe. Actually, it's the very first thing that forms. You become a little, what is it called? A blastocyst. And then you become and then you flatten out into a little disc, and then you get this red streak that comes down you, and that's the start of your neural network. So there you go. It's like one of the first things that forms after the first 128 cells of your body make this little like blob shape, and that starts forming then, and it stops forming 26, 27 odd years later, sooner if you're a female, and everything that, like for example, if you're separated from your parents at the border. Here, I'll get political for a second, because it's important to understand that when you're a 2-year-old and you're not touched or held by an adult, you have lasting neurological effects on your brain that will never go away. Your brain is literally forming, it's growing, it's changing all the way up until it matures into the adult brain in the mid-20s, early 20s. And when you have a 2-year-old who is not touched by adults and not cuddled and not loved with physical affection, it has visible, you can see them in scans, lasting, meaning permanent, period, they will be there when they're an adult, effects on the neurological structures in the brain, especially those related to regulating emotions and attachment. So the ability to form like close relationships with people, right? So these kinds of things are very important to understand, that you were raised in an environment that is going to have lasting implications on how successful you're able to be in various different physical domains and emotional domains. And there's nothing you can do about that now, except work on developing yourself, like in the Buddhist way, right? Where you're meditating and you're working on deep traits that you want to change about yourself through concentrated psychotherapy, in which you can change traits. We know there's a great book about this called Altered Traits I'm reading right now. It's very fascinating. It's about the research, the more modern research in the last few years about how it is that it's actually possible to alter traits, right? And alter brain structures. And what's not possible as well. There's also things that are not possible. Like, for example, recovering from damage done to your brain when you're 2 years old by being separated from, adults who are allowed to touch you and that you have close connection with.
Hi, Weldon.
Oh, shoot. I just hit the space bar and it started playing the question again. All right, so that's the answer to your question, Austin. I have no idea whether or not you're limited or not in the domain that you're in, but the best thing to do is observe, is to look around, see that you reach the adequate cutoffs, train yourself, follow your motivation, see if the growth is worth the effort for you, and if you have it, then keep plugging away, and count on the fact that people who are more talented are going to have less effort because they suck at getting themselves motivated, and as soon as they start losing, and as soon as it's hard, they're all going to drop off, and the only people who are going to be left doing the thing are the people who are actually motivated by it. Be careful of that in video games, because video games are inherently addictive and highly motivating, and so it's a lot easier to be motivated to get good at a video game because you don't have to try very hard, right? You don't have to push through a lot of pain. So video games probably not the space where you're going to differentiate yourself through effort, since everybody's putting in tons of effort because it's easy. All right, let's jump into the second question.
Hey, Weldon. I wanted
Hey,
to
John.
ask you about being able to perform and perform well despite a time of extreme personal anxiety. I can think of two perfect contrasting examples recently, which is Doublelift and Ole. Doublelift experienced an incredible tragedy right before the NALCS finals and had the strength to still not only play but perform superbly, which frankly I find incredible. Whereas at MSI, Ole had some severe anxiety and actually had to step away for at least one game. I want to be clear, my heart goes out to Ole. I know exactly what that's like, and I feel like I'd have done the same in his situation. So this isn't a criticism of him at all. I'm just in awe of how Peter was able to maintain this remarkable poise, and I wanted your insight on how the average person could try to develop that. Thanks.
All right. So how does an average person develop poise? First of all, I'm glad that you used the correct word for it. Poise is the ability to act in a different way than your internal states demand of you. So rather than saying like, I want to perform, but I'm anxious, poise would be, I want to perform and I'm anxious. And then you go and perform anyway. So the basic, staple of poise is that you have an internal state that is at odds with what you must do, and you do it anyway. Okay. Developing poise only happens through two mechanisms. One is experience, which leads to coping. So there's experience which doesn't lead to coping, where you don't reflect on it, you don't learn, you don't cope, you just like run away and hide, or you don't think about it, and work to develop yourself. You just kind of like autopilot through whatever situation you're in. So then you have a ton of experience which doesn't really teach you anything because you aren't open to learning, or you aren't trying to actively learn. And so experience plus coping. So if you have experience, then you're like, okay, I just had this stressful experience and I did this thing, which was like maybe 70% of what I'd want. And the things that helped me do that were this, and it seemed to work better when I was breathing, and I paid attention here, and like these things worked and these things didn't, so I'll cut them out next time. That kind of like rumination and remembering and maybe journaling is very useful. So experience plus coping and reflection. And then the second thing is overt training of the mechanisms which we know are inherent in poise. And there are three mechanisms that are essential for poise. One is awareness of your internal states. So you have to be cognizant of what is happening inside of you. You have to have names for it. You have to be able to notice when you shift states. You have to be able to like recognize when you're nervous versus excited versus anticipatory versus not ready, things like that. So awareness. You need to be accepting. So a lot of people try to fight their internal states, and that is not going to work. So for example, if I tell you, don't think about a pink elephant, just don't think about it. Whatever you do, pink elephant, like don't think about a pink elephant. It's big. It's got fluffy little ears, it's super cute. There was just a trailer for the new Dumbo movie. He can flop his little ears and lift himself off the ground a little bit. And he's pink. He's got a little fur on his tips of his ears, so they're a little fuzzy when the light shines through them. It's really hard to purposely not do something that you're trying not to do. So if you say like, don't be nervous, don't be nervous, don't be nervous, the ironic reality of our minds is that you will kind of end up being nervous. So it's really important to not try to control the surfacing of internal states, but rather to accept them and roll with them and cope with them, right? So people who are like overly controlling and trying to like be like, no, don't think that. Oh shoot, I thought it. No. Or like, okay, don't. I'm in tennis. Am I going to double fault? Am I going to double fault? No, I'm not going to double fault. Okay, fault one. Okay, don't think about the second fault. Just, I don't have a one fault. I'm not going to double fault. I'm just thinking about this is like I'm 0 and 0. It's not, I'm not down like 0-40, love 40, and I'm not about to double fault, and I'm just like 0-0, and this is my first serve, and oops, double fault. So trying not to think about stuff doesn't work. We know that really clearly, both from like what applied sports psychology and also research sports psychology. Acceptance, like the ability to accept the arise of these internal states, is really important. And then, of course, a wide variety of coping mechanisms that allow us to commit to a specific action that is in opposition to the internal state. Those are the three parts of the three ingredients to poise: awareness, being able to accept, and being able to then take an action that is in direct opposition to whatever your internal state is with focus. Which, by the way, segues directly into, so yes, you can train that. You can get it through experience and then automatically reflecting on it, feeling about what worked and what didn't work. So experience plus coping and reflecting on that. And then the training, which is, of course, my MAC program. This is exactly what I train. I train poise. Literally in the first week of the MAC program, I talk about poise. It's the definition of what it is that we do. And the whole concept here is mindfulness, which is the training of the awareness section of that, acceptance, which is the training of the acceptance section of that, and commitment, which is the training of the disciplined action part of that. So, yes, I am sad that Team Liquid didn't hire me to teach Ole poise. It would have made a big difference, and then he wouldn't have had to suffer the way that he did, or he would have suffered much less because he would have suffered the initial, emotional turbulence of his time, there on the big stage, but he wouldn't have suffered the consequences of his actions because he coped badly and then acted quote unquote badly, and then now he has to suffer not only the regret of those choices that he made, but the regret of his inability to cope with the kind of pressures that came along. So that is what poise helps you with, and that is why I wish that they hired me, but they didn't. So right now the time is ticking. The first week of the LCS has started in about 3 weeks. Usually every single year since 2014, every single season since 2014, I've started getting emails from teams about 3 weeks in when they're tanking, asking for me to come and train their teams in poise. So we'll see what happens this year as well. This is my video program, though. This is for amateur athletes or professional athletes who want to use this program. And it's basically $30. You take it online videos, $25 if you use the code AskWeldon. I put it that way so that you would use the code, so please do. Unless you want to buy me an extra coffee. I think I bought a coffee yesterday that was $5, and I really regret that. But if you buy the program without using the code, actually, given taxes, that probably only comes to like $3.75. Whatever. Anyway, check it out. 47 videos, all online. Come with a lecture and a mindfulness training component in every one, and I'm changing it into an app, and it's on its way, progressing to be an app. I've already refurbished the whole first program, the whole first week, and a little bit of the second week, and the programming is about 50% complete, about $8,000 into the production and development of the app, so euros. So the money that you spend on this will support both my family and my kids and my brand, and also the development of this application into a phone app that then you can use, and that suits more than just, has ongoing kind of content rather than just the static course, and adapts to you as you wish. So check it out, John, if you're interested. Probably you already know about it. But anyway, let's jump into the final question of the show.
Hello, Weldon. As context, I am a League of Legends player aspiring to hit Challenger and eventually go pro. My previous training routine was resulting ineffective, so I took your advice about limiting the amount of games played each day to only 2 games a day. I have been pulling off these
Great
2 games
job.
a day policy for about a month now, and I have improved since then significantly. It's going really well.
There you go.
However, I have just started the university summer break, and I have a lot more free time. I have kept the 2 games a day policy for the moment. I'm doing the MAC program and going to the gym on a daily basis, but I still have spare time. So my question is, what is your recommendation? Should I keep the 2 games a day policy, since I feel like it prevents me from playing for escapism and forming bad habits? Or should I change it a bit and maybe add like 1 or 2 days a week where I do high volume training and play 10 plus games in one day? Or maybe train high volume for 7 days in a row and then return to 2 games a day or something similar? Thanks in advance.
Okay. First of all, Victor. Fantastic question. Very detailed, very specific, lots of information. Also, you took my advice before and it's working, so even better. And also, you're in the MAC program. So those of you who just heard my advertisement for the MAC program, here you go. It's exactly the kind of result you can expect. All right, so just to restate the question, so I understand it clearly, so you know I'm answering the question that you asked. You've been doing 4 weeks of low volume training, two games a day, and it's helping you progress. And now you have more free time, and you want to know about high volume training mixing in. What I recommend is experimentation. First of all, you should always look at your progress over like a 2-week span, not like a 1-day span, right? Progress over a 2-week span, and then adapt your training to suit it. And what I would recommend is actually not 1 day of high volume and then going back low. I don't think that would be super productive. I think it would be better to do high volume training for multiple days in a row. So like a week, to kind of push yourself to the extreme in a way. So this is something that I don't recommend if you want to have a balanced family life, if you want to have a relaxed summer, if you want to build a relationship with your mother and your parents, if you want to honor them, and do chores around the house, things like that. Figure out how to adapt it to your family life and your goals for who it is, the kind of person you want to be, right? But then if you can do 6 games a day, 6 hours a day, ramp it up and push that for 9 days, 7 days, 5 days, and then taper it back down, then gradually decrease, okay? Go down to 4 hours, then 3 hours, then 2 hours, and 2 games a day, and then, maybe to a tournament after that, increase. So essentially what you're doing here is you're allowing the mind to relax into the idea that these practices mean less. You still want to keep up the same kind of focus and the same kind of habits that you have from your refined study of 2 games, right? But you want to practice more. And what's going to happen is you're going to get tired. Doing what you're doing for 2 games, where you do VOD review and you do preparation and you anticipate them and you focus and you work really hard on them, you do that for 7 games a day, you're going to be exhausted and overworked. And so your brain is naturally going to put in less and less effort for each game. And essentially what you did for 4 weeks was you banked your capability to take the game seriously, and that's going to work for a couple days. You're going to be ooh, and you're going to focus hard, and you're going to strive in all of your games, and your skill is going to escalate, right? And then your brain's going to start being no, I can't handle this. I'm not going to maintain this level of effort every single day. It's going to start naturally drawing back effort, and it's going to start taking games less seriously, and it's going to start focusing less in them, and it's going to start feeling less pain and grief when you lose, because it's going to be brain here, yeah, I know that you're actually going to play another game in about 15 minutes, so the one you just lost, don't really care all that much about it. Even if you say it's important, I don't care. And so you're going to start experiencing less intense emotions, and as a consequence, less intense learning moments from these games. And that's when you're going to dial it back down. You're going to start increasing the intensity again. You're going to start decreasing the volume, and you're going to start showing your brain that okay, now I'm playing 3 games and that's it. It's a best of 3. If we win the first 2, we're golden. The last one, we can relax a little. If we lose the first one, we win the second one, everything is on the line. These are the only games I'm playing today, brain. So take it seriously. And your brain's going to be oh, okay. Yeah, I get it now. I'm going to be really sad if I lose this. Okay. Let's focus. So I recommend this kind of cyclical training. And I do recommend that it comes in waves, not just not kind of like a rigid predefined schedule, 6 days on or 6 days off, 1 day on, 6 days off, 1 day on. I don't think that's, I think you should experiment with that. First of all, I think it would be cool if you could do 2 games a day for 5 days and then 1 game or 1 day where you're doing 6 games. But if you have the time, what would be better is a cycle, high to low to high to low. And you should stay at each level until you notice the switch, right? You should go high, and then you notice when you start to not be able to keep track of your goals in the game anymore. You're I'm not remembering, I'm making the same mistakes. Boom, stop, right? Taper it back down. Get really focused on your learning, get really focused on your goals. If you're not getting high quality training in the games that you're doing, it doesn't matter if you do more and more and more games, you're just going to reinforce bad habits, right? So bring it down, bring it back to low volume, get really focused on your learning and your attention and your capabilities of deploying your focus towards specific goals in the game, multiple goals, right? Because it's a complex game and we don't have drills, so you have to have something you're training for laning phase, something you're training for skirmishes, something you're training for macro phase, and keeping all of those in your mind and like focused on them and striving towards them is really, really complex and takes a lot of energy, mental energy. So you taper back down, and then when things are progressing and you feel like you have mental resources and physical resources, so you have a good relationship with the people around you, and like losing yourself into your training for a week is not going to like destroy relationships or goals or ambition or your physical health, then you ramp it back up and you take that intensity to the extreme that you can push your mind. Thanks for the question, Victor. This is definitely one of the best questions I've ever had on the show. I'm not saying because the topic, right? The topic's great, but the fact that you gave me so much detail and you're so involved in your training and you've been doing, you've already taken some advice, you've already taken the first step, and you've reduced, and you have the effort from that and the results from that, and now you're trying to layer it up to even a more complex level. I loved the recent boot camp I was able to do with TSM because I'd worked with 4 of the players before, and I'd worked with Mike also, on and off throughout the first split, so at least we knew each other. But I was able not to have to deal with all the like silly little new stuff, defining what poise is, and working through mindfulness. And we just really go into like advanced mental readiness, and real practical training. And that was so fun. And that was what this question gave me a glimmer of, is like we're going to go to the next level because we've already dealt with all the basics, and I don't have to say the basics again. We can just go on to like, layering of tactics. So thank you for the question. Thank you for the work that you've done to make it so interesting, and good luck this summer with your training. All right, guys, that's the show. You can check out this show live at twitch.tv/mindgamesweldon. I'm going to head over there right now that the show is over, and hang out with the audience and answer questions before I head out to the gym. 6 a.m. just opened, so I'm going to wait for them to make their oatmeal, and then I'm going to show up. And make sure to check out the Mac program right down there. There's the code AskWeldon, and there's a link for you. I'll talk to y'all later.